Cool. That was a really nice talk. Let's give a round of applause for Victor. Thank you. I really like the very meta idea of an app that builds apps. That's very cool. All right. If I didn't introduce myself, I'm Tom Goldenberg. I'm a developer at Agolo. We're a machine learning and natural language processing company startup. And I'm going to give a talk today. I normally host these things, but I felt like I had something to say for this meetup. And I recently released this tutorial, buildreactnative.com. And so I want to talk about not just about the tutorial, but some of the lessons learned along the way and some of the things I think that could be helpful for the community. Let's see if we can get this to work. So first, the tutorial, Build React Native, essentially takes you step by step through the process of building a complex app. And most tutorials, they make a to-do app or make a Hacker News clone if it's a website. I wanted to do something that was a little bit more complex, and so we chose like a Meetup clone. And so you've used Meetup, there's a lot of different functionality in there. Like there's maps, there's kind of a calendar functionality, there's messaging between members. And so that's kind of the model that we took to it. The two people involved, obviously myself, and Nick Brown, who unfortunately he's not here tonight, but we worked on this together. He's a product manager at Huge, which does kind of a lot of mobile and web consulting work. And so we kind of combined our forces. Nick is really good with the design and kind of getting the right look and feel of the app. And I kind of approach it more from a functionality of just programming. And so it ended up being a good tutorial, but also looks nice. So how did we get the idea to make a tutorial, and why did we do it? Originally, Nick and I was working at a small startup that was using React Native about a year ago. And just as a side project, we're like, let's build an app in React Native. It doesn't have to be big, just like a little something small that we can do in a month and just get out there and get some experience. And we chose to make a mobile version of the Bhagavad Gita, which, if you're not familiar, it's an Indian religious philosophical text. And the reason we chose it was that when we looked online at all the apps that were out there for the Bhagavad Gita, the design is just atrocious, like really bad. And so I'm like, Nick, you're a really good designer. I've lived in India and I taught Sanskrit for a number of years, which is like the ancient kind of Latin of Indian languages. And so I thought it would be a nice project to work on. So that's how we originally started teaming up. And while we're building this app, remember it's a year ago, we ran into so many problems. And there was not a lot of documentation online, and some of just the UI stuff that we're trying to do was difficult. And honestly, that's why we started this meetup, so that we can meet other people that were using React Native and kind of hey, are you experiencing this frustration? And oh yeah, I am too. And that's kind of how it started. So yeah, the problem was lack of documentation, not a whole lot of good, complex examples online. And so that's why we decided to come up with the tutorial. So yeah, that was almost a year ago. We released the tutorial like a month, 2 months ago, and it's gotten pretty good feedback. We're not promoting it very heavily, but the people that are using it have given us good feedback, and generally it's been pretty positively received. So besides the tutorial, what I want to share is some of the challenges we face in making the tutorial and some things we learned. And I break it down into 5 things. First one is when we're building the actual app, we didn't write the instructions first. We built the app and then we wrote the instructions. So when we're building the app, do we worry about our database? Do we worry about where are we going to host our backend, what server, how are we going to build a database schema, all this kind of stuff? Or do we just build out the UI? and not worry about all that stuff and use fake data? So that's the question, is fixtures or data first? The second one was like, I'm sure a lot of people that use React Native to Redux or not to Redux, right? When you're getting started, is Redux like, does it complicate things too much? Like Redux is awesome, but where should you use it? And so we debated whether we should like teach the tutorial with Redux or not. Third thing, how to API, right? Because React Native is just a UI. Like it's totally up to you. Aside from storing data on the phone, you know, if you want users to be able to communicate with each other and authenticate users through server, how are you going to do that, right? Fourth one, I use the term naggravating. I learned that from my wife, but no, it's her word. She uses it, not that. I'm being recorded, so I want to be safe. So why is navigation naggravating, if you will? Like React Native navigation is like, as soon as you're like, oh, okay, I found like the perfect solution, someone else is like, yeah, but what about this? And you're like, oh man, like really, I just did a whole project. Now I got to go back and learn something new. So in building a tutorial, that was a big question we had, like how are we going to approach navigation, which is really integral to a project. And last one is how are we going to actually serve the content that we're writing? So not the mobile app, but you know, how are we going to write this content? How are we going to host it, serve it in a way that we can adapt with the changes of React Native, right? So those are the questions we had going into this. So first, I don't know if by my tone of voice if I gave it away, but I believe in doing fixture first development. So not worrying about your database schema or your, you know, which fields each collection has, or if you're using Mongo or if you're using SQL, how you're going to set up your database. Just build the UI and get it so that you're happy with it and that you think it's usable and useful. And then you can worry about plugging in data later. And that's kind of the approach that I really advocated for in this project. And you know, it also made it kind of fun. We use hipster ipsum, so like, you know, just kind of fun lorem ipsum stuff. And so it makes the process of building that initial prototype a lot more fun, I think. So I'm a big proponent of that, and that's how we handled the building the app and teaching it as well. Redux. Redux is awesome. I love Redux. I use it at my job. But these are tweets, I don't know if you can read them, from Dan Abramov, who is one of the creators of Redux. Don't use Redux unless you tried local component state and were dissatisfied. And this speaks a lot to, I think, just any technology. Don't just use it because it's the new hot thing. Use it because you felt that pain of whatever it is it addresses, and that will help you to use it in the proper way. I know Dan is sitting here. He gave a talk on Redux last time. So that's the approach that we took with the tutorial. We talk about Redux early on. We do not use it in the code during the building of the app, but at the end we show how to migrate from a React local component state app to a Redux, a universal kind of application state app. And I feel that's a big use case as well that sometimes doesn't get addressed. It's like, you already have a React app. Do I have to break it down and start anew to get Redux, or can I gradually bring it in? So we show more of the latter. This is one of the things I'm proud about. How to API. We considered so many things here. You have Rails, you have Meteor, you have Express and Node. There's so many, shout them. You have, right, Parse back in the day, or Firebase. We ended up going with Deployed. If you haven't heard of it, I highly recommend it. I'm going to try to give a little bit of a code sample of how it works and everything. But basically, let's see if I can actually do that. Is this my terminal? Yeah, so Deployed is basically it's just a GUI for an Express and MongoDB server and database. So it's really easy. It's just, you npm install deployed. I already have it here. I should. Oh, well, let's just see if this works. Create API. Yeah, so that was it. You npm install global. Let me just do it. But I'm not going to type it because I already have it installed. And that will install deployed, and then you just create it with the terminal line command. And if I go in here and I hit DPD, it will start my my server with a MongoDB database. And let me see if I can open up Chrome. So if now, this is cool. So if I go to 2403, I have a GUI for my server. It's really neat. And you have automatic users. Sure, it's just going to create a RESTful API, and I can create fields with different data types and constraints. I can see my database, the data. I can even do events, like after creating a user, create a notification. Really easy. And so we, let me go back here. Sorry. What this enables us to do is to focus on teaching React Native and not teaching how to build an API in a server. And so I think that was a really cool thing and something that not a lot of people know about, but can be really helpful if you're just building a simple REST API for your mobile app. Let me go next. Okay, next. Navigation. So just a little backstory on navigation. When React Native initially shipped, it had two different modules, Navigator iOS and Navigator. And Navigator iOS was only ran on iOS. It was pretty smooth, but not really configurable. And so support was dropped. So X that out. And then, Navigator was kind of like what everyone was using until Facebook said that they're not using Navigator, they're using Navigation Experimental. Which is it doesn't lend a whole lot of faith behind it just by calling it something like that. And so well, what do we do? And now you have other solutions. I actually really like React Native Router Flux. I think it has some kinks in it, but it's nice. But basically we decided to play it safe and go with Navigator since it's the most I would guess the most widely used. And what I've used all four of these, and I find that migrating from Navigator to either of the 3 or 4 is not difficult at all. So that's how we handled that. Cool. Serving content. So this is another thing I'm proud of. I think this was an awesome solution. When we started doing this, a friend of mine, Anders, is Anders here? No. He introduced me to Gitbook, and Gitbook is just really cool. It allows you to write your content in GitHub flavored Markdown, which most developers prefer. And then it takes care of your content like a Git repository. And so we would write the content in Markdown. That would be a Git repository. We would have a web app with Meteor.js that's separate, its own Git repository. And so we would host the Meteor app and the Markdown content on DigitalOcean. And Meteor, each route for each chapter would just reference to the Gitbook Markdown. And what this allows us to do, this is a screenshot of Gitbook. So really nice UI you can use it for a lot of different things, documentation, company wikis, etc. It allows us to make changes to the content. If there's a breaking change in React Native, if one of our readers points out a mistake, we're able to go and change the content without actually changing the web app that's serving the content, which I think is pretty cool. We take the markdown and we, just apply standard CSS to make it look really nice and make it really readable. And with Meteor, I don't know if you guys have used Meteor, but it basically just calls a server-side method to fetch the markdown content and then renders it in the React component. So that's what that is. And the different file directories depending on whether it's development or production. It was even so good that I convinced my company to use it as our company wiki. And we've had really good success with that. So yeah, that's all I have. Check out the website, buildreactnative.com. I have a promo code for the meetup. I'm on Twitter, Tom Goldenberg, and I hope you enjoyed. Thanks. Yeah.
What version of React Native did you go up to? And you talk about some difficulty in upgrading React Native, which I'm sure many of us have experienced.
Yeah, absolutely. So, this has been an ongoing project for a long time. So we were even in that part where React was part of React Native even, and then we just had to go through and change everything. At that point, I was like, I'm just going to do it from scratch. And but we're pretty up there. I think we're at 28 or 29. I have a plan to, it's about every month or so that I take a weekend to really go through the content and update it. So it hasn't been any breaking changes, but I'd like to go through and try to keep it up to date regularly. Yeah, Dan?
Are you also using Flow with your React Native app?
So the question is, am I using Flow? I'm not using Flow, not yet. I have my eyes on it, and I think it's very interesting, but definitely for the tutorial, I wanted to keep it super, super simple. So I'm not using that. Anyone else? Yeah?
You mentioned something about the REST service.
Yeah.
So can you brief about more, how you're going to create that using this, or
Yeah, sure. So you can. It's a free service. When I think I was on a podcast recently. It's well, what's the catch, right? And it's not. It's just a node package that you can use. In the tutorial, we actually show how to deploy it with DigitalOcean. So we cover even the deployment process as well. But as far as just getting started and running things locally, it's literally just what I showed you. They have a plus button to add a collection. And if you're familiar with MongoDB, it's very easy. Yeah.
I have another question.
Sure.
Can I control this design using JSON, while building the app?
I'm sorry?
Can I control this design of building app using JSON or something like that?
So the design in the tutorial, you mean for the mobile app, right?
Yes.
Yeah, in the tutorial, Nick has made a style sheet that we import into all the different screens, but that's totally customizable. And we show you how to use React styling in React Native as well. Okay. Anyone else? Oh.
What about testing frameworks, or how do you go through about testing? What are your opinions about testing?
We do not cover testing in the tutorial itself. We're definitely geared more towards independent app developers, but it's definitely something that in a larger company that's super important. I just read an article about the snapshot testing and how that's being used with React Native. I think that's a really exciting thing. I know the Jest support has been, they've been working on improving that very recently. So those are the two things that I'm particularly familiar with. Yeah.
Does this cover the basics for React Native beginners?
Yeah, it does. We was someone who used React on the web, but has never used React Native before, so kind of familiar with how components work and how React works on the web. But we do kind of give a brief overview of that stuff, and as well as ES6 syntax and stuff like that, because that can trip up a lot of beginners as well. All right, thank you guys. Got Connor coming up next.